Good morning, church. Thanks again for tuning in today. Glad you're joining me as we continue to look into God's Word. We continue on in our series, The Race is On. Last week we talked about the fact that we're all called to run the race. We're all thrown into the midst of this race, particularly as Christians. If we want to look at our spiritual journey as a race metaphor, like Paul did. And talks to Christians. Paul spoke to Christians about what it means to train and prepare and use that language that athletes would use. And so last week we looked at what it means to run this race, and we have a choice. We're all been called into this race, spiritually speaking, and so we have the choice to either run it and encourage others that are running it, or we can stop running and sit down on the side of that course and fold our arms and pout and complain and discourage other people that are called to run. And so that was my prayer last week, that we would all join in and just encourage one another and continue on the course and running the race. But with every race, if you physically have ever run a race before, every runner would experience something similar in that at some point, if it's a challenging race, now I get some of you have trained for a 25-mile race, and so to run a 5-mile race isn't challenging. But if you are entering into a challenging race, at some point along that course, every runner is going to experience a moment where your body is beginning to share warning signs that you might just need to stop, right? And your legs are aching, your lungs are burning, you're nowhere close to the finish line, so you're starting to feel this discouragement come over you. And for many runners, it's not me because I'm clearly not a runner, but for many runners, I've been told that there's this point where you can just either quit or push into that pain, and on the other side of that pain is this second wind. Some have talked about this. There's almost a runner's high where all of that pain and suffering just seems to lift, and they coast into the finish line. And that same idea is true of those of us metaphorically running the race in our spiritual journeys. See, I think there comes a time in all of our journeys where pain just starts to grow. We start to recognize some aches and pains that weren't there previously. We start to really sense that fatigue, and spiritually speaking, our lungs begin to burn, and spiritually speaking, our bodies begin to shut down. We've seen that. In the church, we call that burnout. We've seen our other Christians become very, very frustrated in the midst of challenging days and times. And so just like that athlete has a choice to make to push into that pain and try to get on the other side of that, we too as Christians have that same choice. We talked last week that it's our choice to even run in the first place, but if you've committed to running and you're so invested and now trouble comes, you still have that choice. God doesn't force any of us into this journey of discipleship, but you still have that choice as well, spiritually speaking, to push into that pain, to try to understand the tough circumstances that are around you, to change your training habits and to change your course or maybe your stride or whatever it is you would do if you were physically running a race. We have to think about that spiritually speaking, and so we can begin to push into that pain. And it's my prayer that as you do that, God will then allow you this second wind, spiritually speaking. You'll be able to get on the other side of that pain, and God will begin to open up new ideas of ministry. God will begin to reveal to you fresh hope and encouragement, and then you can begin to see your spirit revive, and you can take that energy and use it to propel you that much closer to the finish line. Isaiah shares a very similar language with a group of people that are in a tough spot. In Isaiah chapter 40, verse 30 and 31, Isaiah shares these words with Jewish people that have been living in exile for well over 50 years. Some theologians believe around 50 years, others are dating it to around 70 years, but either way, it was a long time. Isaiah is prophesying to Jews that were in exile longer than I've been alive. And so here's the words that Isaiah shares with a group of people that are now given the opportunity to go back to their homeland. Listen to what he says. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. See, I love these two verses here because put yourself in the shoes of the Jewish community that has now been given permission and the opportunity, rather, to go back to their homeland of Judah. Some 50 to 70 years ago, Babylon came in and conquered Judah, literally destroying Judah and like weighing it or just laying it to waste. And now, 50 to 70 years later, you have a group of people that had been gathered up, removed from their homeland. Not that they would have wanted to stay there anyways, because it was just really laid to waste, but they nonetheless have been removed from their homeland, exiled to Babylon, a foreign country to them, where they had to live amongst Babylonians and their customs. And it was just, I can't even imagine what that must be like. Actually, I can imagine, because I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories lately about what is happening to the United States, and we're afraid that there's just groups of communist leaders coming in and socialist leaders coming in to just tear apart what we know to be our home. And for many of us, we don't even know what to make of it, and I can see a lot of us starting to become very reactionary because we're responding out of great fear. So I guess in a way I kind of can imagine what it must have been like for Jews to now be told, hey, some well over 50 years later, yeah, you guys can go back. And I don't even know how many of them would want to go back, because it wasn't just go back to the way life used to be, but they had to go back to a war-torn, wasted land that they would have had to eventually rebuild. Think about this, living in a day and age where walls meant so much, right? Because walls meant safety. Walls were a part of your identity. And now you're getting to go back to a land that had none. You're expected to begin to farm again and to rebuild your home and to begin to buy and sell in a marketplace, but yet that could all be lost any day because you don't have the protection of a wall. And we hear about that and the Jews lamenting about what it was like to go back, and some didn't want to go back. Nehemiah talks about that they even drew lots, they drew straws to see who would go back, because some are like, it's Babylon, it's a little different than what we were, what our life used to be like, but come on, it's not the safest place to be right now. And here's Isaiah talking to a group of people that were like, do we want to go back? And if we go back, what are we going to be faced with? And you're talking about a long time, 50 to 70 years, with a group of people that did not have that long of a lifespan. So imagine the majority of the people getting ready to go back never even knew what Judah was like in the first place. And the majority of the people that were getting ready to head back had been raised in a culture that had many different gods. And here Isaiah is talking about the one true God. And so in a way, I guess I can kind of relate to that too, because I'm a parent of 3 kids. I'm bringing up kids with a lot of different gods in our society. I mentioned that last week, and for those that were able to gather, we think about all the stuff that we invest in and that consumes our time, that we essentially worship. I'm preaching to one of those right now on a phone. We have been complaining in our home that our service seems to be horrible lately, and we're paying all this money for a service, but quite honestly, it's not even the money that we're complaining about. It's the fact that we don't have service because we don't even know how to operate and function without our phones. You want to see my kids go crazy, watch the internet go down. We can't even begin to think about what life would be like without the internet. I was talking with some people even earlier today about the mighty dollar. And yes, I'm concerned about a society without currency, right? That makes me nervous. But really, a lot of our fear comes from the fact that because we rely so much on that money. And I could go on and on and on about what it's like to try to worship the one true God today amongst all these other deities that take our attention away from God. And Isaiah is talking to a group of people like that as well. But in that group are those that had remained faithful, are those that can remember the good old days of what it was like to live in Judah. In that group of exiled Jews are the ones that kept their faith strong for all those years in Babylon. And it's to those people that Isaiah is sharing these words. And he's encouraging them, look, I know you're tired. Listen, I'm just going to be honest, I know you're old. I get it. And now you have to uproot and head back. And it's not going to look the same when you get back there. But I'm talking to you, faithful Jewish men and women. I'm letting you know, look, even young people get weary. You know, even the strong youth are going to occasionally stumble and fall. But listen, remember the example you showed them? Let me remind you of that example today, that those who wait on the Lord, the one true God, those that remain faithful in their faith and in their beliefs, even during the most trying times of perhaps your life, those that remain faithful to the Lord, they are the ones that will renew their strength. And remember, even though you're old, if you will stay true to the one true God, if you will stay true to your faith during these trying times, it will be such a breath of fresh air. It'll be like you have just you'll be able to soar on wings like eagles. And you know what? Yeah, you're in the middle of a tough race, and I know your legs are burning and your lungs are on fire right now. You really could just sit down in the shade with a cold glass of water. I understand all that. But listen, when you wait on the Lord, when you remain true and steadfast, you will be able to run that race and not grow tired anymore. Listen, you'll be able to walk and not be faint. That's powerful. And that's a great reminder for us today, church. And I'm talking really specifically to those that have been serving the Lord for a lot longer than I have been alive, perhaps. Listen, I get it. This pandemic's going to lift, and we're going to get back to some kind of a normal. I understand. But I have a feeling that what we're heading into, we've already experienced it, but one day we're not going to have the excuses anymore, and we're going to just be left with a brand new landscape. And it's so easy for those of us that remember the good old days to grumble and complain and to say, you know what, I don't even want to go there. You know, let somebody else do it. You guys draw straws and figure it out, because I'm not going there. This might not be the best place for me, but it's better than what's out there. I'm going to stay here. And it's easy for us to say that. I'm speaking to myself too, but I'm calling on the faithful to say, you know what? Tomorrow's going to look new. And it's going to be scary. It's going to be trying. There's going to be days that I'm going to have to be reminded to keep on keeping on. But I don't want to give up. I'm not going to quit. I don't want to be a discouragement. Instead, I want to be an example of what it looks like to wait upon the Lord. I want to show a new generation. I want to show some people that don't know any different. Because that's my prayer. That's my prayer, that on the other side of this, we start to reach people for God that don't know any different, that have never been brought up in a Christian context. And I'm not saying brought up in church, because I don't know what church is going to look like next week. But I want to reach some people that don't know what it means to be a Christ follower. And so I want to show them by my example what it means to wait on the Lord, what it means to be a prayer warrior, what it means to be invested in God's word, what it means to be a servant and loving of all people. I want to show this world that.